Quad 66. Okay, so I'm doing an actual tuning session here, and I figure, well, let me capture some video and show you what I do. So this is specifically capturing data on the Blackbox to go back and look at. So this build is my Warpig 122. It's a Zero build with HDZero system. It's got that carbon cage that I've shown you before. And so here it goes. So first thing I like to do when I get my quad up is to do a couple sweeps of the throttle. So taking it all the way up through the throttle, and it's not just a straight punch out, it's actually kind of like a sweep up the throttle so you get the full throttle range. I do that like twice, sometimes 3 times is good, but 2-3 times. Then I go through and start looking at my snap rolls. And you just want to get in a bunch of these, snapping it back and forth, and then go into your snap flips. And again, capturing several of these. And then we go into our twitch moves. So start with the roll. And you want these kind of quick back and forth, and I start small and I go bigger. And you want to do it both on the roll and the pitch. Then I do a couple of split S to get something that's a little bit more like actual flight. In this case, minute 11, I want to get about minute 30. This Blackbox on the TuneRC board, it fills up pretty quick. It's a smaller Blackbox. And so with the rate that I'm logging at, I can get about a minute 30 of data. And the last thing I do is when I come into land, I actually disarm before I land, so that way I don't get that jostling when it's landing in the Blackbox log. All right, let's go pull this up and see what we have. All right, let's take a look at the Blackbox log now. So I still look at stuff in Blackbox Explorer. PID Toolbox is another good option too. I just personally like looking at it in Explorer. The way I set mine up is I have one screen where I basically get all the information I need and no excess information. And so what I put on my screen here is I get my gyro roll and my gyro pitch, set point roll and set point pitch. And these 4 things really tell me how well the set point is going to be tracking or how well the gyro is going to be tracking the set point. So for example, here's a little snap roll right here. This gyro in red, we can compare it to the set point in blue and how well is it staying on. And I do that both for roll and pitch. And then the other thing I look for is where am I in terms of filtering and noise. And so my D term really tells me that, because the D term really amplifies the noise, and that's where the worst of it comes out. And so one of the things I actually first, before I even really get into the details of looking at my set point tracking, is I really focus on my D term and see. If I'm seeing, let me find a clean patch over here, and I know I have one in here. So if I'm seeing D term that looks like this through my entire log, this is pretty mild. This tells me here, if my whole log looked like this, then I'd have room that I could move the D term up. But my log, and it doesn't look like that. Instead, we've got a bunch of these, what I call like kind of D term blooms. Maybe a little bit more on pitch than roll, but both of them are there. And we can kind of see them whenever I do like a throttle blip. And we can see them just kind of like, basically kind of responding whenever there's some throttle changes that D term kind of escalates. We can also look at it and visualize it and see where it's coming from by opening up the plots. And so in this case, this is pretty classic BMI gyro look, where once the BMI internal filtering kicks in, it really just stomps out everything. And so one of the things I know from this, and I'll just show you both the roll and the pitch, just to make sure it's true on both the roll and the pitch, is that, yeah, once that BMI internal gyro filtering, once it kicks in, it really stomps things out. And so one of the things I know I can get rid of here then is going to be a little bit of filtering in terms of this PT1. It's got a, it's at 1,000, and I can just get rid of that because up high, this internal filtering on the BMI gyro really just takes care of everything. And so that's, although it's not a lot of filtering that PT1 filter is at 1,000, it's just not needed. So I can take that out. In terms of where I do still have noise, we can go ahead and do our waterfall plot here and see this isn't really motor, this is not motor band dominant noise. You can see a little bit of a hint of a motor band here, but basically the RPM filtering is really knocking out those motor bands well. And what's left is some, a little bit of frame resonance, and just kind of general overall noise. And so in terms of what we could do to get rid of that, really, in this case, in this quad, it's not really about the filtering. It's really going to be about the frame itself, because I've got this on a 3mm frame, and this is a 1204 build, flying 3-inch props. And for that build, we really could be on the 4mm frame, and that would help us out, and it would give us more room to push things. The other thing we could do is I've only have one dynamic notch. We can add a second one, and that would help out in here. Those dynamic notches really do a good job on this kind of like vertical frame-ish sort of resonance stuff here. And so we could do that, but the trade-off there is the prop wash handling. The prop wash handling will get worse as we add more filtering. So after I get my general sense of where we are, then I kind of want to look at a little bit more closely what my P and D balance, my feed forward and D balance are. And so to do that, I typically don't take these out, but to make it easier for you to see, I'm just taking out my D term. So now we can really focus on the motor tracking. One of the things that's good habit to do, but you really hear this more than see it, is look at, as you push up your throttle, look for your little P oscillations. You can see a hint of them creeping in here, but nothing major. And so that's what these throttle ramp ups are good for, besides just generating a nice spread of noise across your full throttle band, but also looking for your P oscillations. And there's not much going on here, so on this quad, you've got room to push up to P, and it'd be fine. Now, in terms of tracking, basically what I do is I look at my snaps and my twitch moves. The full snap rolls and snap flips are really good to kind of get an overall sense of how things are going. And so basically what you want to see is your feed forward is all down here. So your feed forward should throw the gyro, see here in red, onto that set point in blue. And you can see that this feed forward is really getting that gyro on the set point real fast. Up here, this is really going to be your P. Your P is going to hold you, like once you're at your max rotation, your P is going to kind of really lock you in. Now, if your feed forward, if you don't have enough P, sometimes you don't finish out coming up to that max. And so if this is really slow to get up here, that might be not enough P. If you're getting a lot of waviness here, not staying on your max rotation, that's going to be too little P. And then on the downside, again, your feed forward gets you on, and then your P holds you on. So in this case, we could see this could probably use a little bit more P to hold it on. Obviously, we want to look at a couple of these. Look at it in the opposite direction too. And again, we see the same story. The feed forward's getting you on the curve really well. P is finishing it out pretty well, getting you back on, and maybe just not holding quite as well as it should. So maybe just a little bit of P term there. Do the same thing for your flips, and so we were looking at rolls, and we can also look at our flips and basically make that same analysis. And so here's our flips, forward flips and back flips. And what you want to look here is basically that, usually on the flip axis, you're going to have, it's just not going to be as clean. That movement is just not quite as clean for the quad, and oftentimes you just don't have quite the same control here. But this looks pretty reasonable. It's also part of it too. My stick movement is just not as clean with my flips than they are in my rolls. My rolls has cleaner stick movement. So now we want to go to our twitch moves. because one of the things that can happen is just optimizing for the full snap rolls and flips. You can kind of overcook it on your little twitch moves here. And we see a hint of that probably right here. This isn't bad. To me, this is totally tolerable. When you're using a lot of feed forward can actually push this gyro ahead of the set point, and you can see it's doing it just a tiny bit there. See how the gyro is just leading the set point just a tiny bit? That's because that feed forward is coming in real strong and actually throwing it a little bit across. To fix that up, the answer for that is that, and then you can see kind of where it gets a little unglued here. The answer for that is just increasing your P and D, and that would clean that right up. When I get to the really violent moves, this is really pushing things hard. So this is basically, I'm trying to like shake the gyro off the set point. And this is doing a pretty good job here, where you can see that the feed forward's getting onto getting the gyro on the set point, and it's tracking really well, only losing things just a tiny bit. And obviously, we looked at roll. We also want to do the same thing for pitch. And again, my pitch moves just aren't as pretty as my roll moves. But basically, we're doing that same thing. We're looking, is feed forward getting ahead, getting the gyro ahead of the set point, or is it leaving it on? And then are you coming unglued a little bit? So if you're getting ahead of the gyro, what you want is a little bit more P and D. If it's having a hard time getting on the curve, you see that more in the full snaps, but you can't see it here if it's kind of egregious. But basically what I'm seeing overall is that this quad is tracking set point really well on both pitch and roll, and it could stand to use just a tiny bit more P and D. I think feed forward's where it needs to be, but the P and D could come a little bit higher. But as I said before, this quad is really kind of at the limit of where I want the D, because if I add any more D, this noise is really gonna, so this P and D noise, if I add any more D, then this is just really going to kind of get away from us. So the answer on this quad is this tune is basically done, and I figured it'd be pretty close because this was the tune I did for my 3-inch quads already. So I figured that this would be pretty close. I thought maybe you could use a little bit more P and D because now we've got a heavier quad with the HDZero. But that's basically where it needs to be. And the only thing that we could do to get the performance better here, I think, is go to the 4mm frame. And with that 4mm frame, it would definitely make a difference. It would take down a lot of this D noise, and we'd have a little bit of room to push up our PIDs a little bit more. Now, that would add some weight, so then you got to ask yourself, well, are we going to like take the noise down, and then we need even more P and D to get where we need to be? I think it would work out, and I think this quad would probably fly just a little bit better on the 4mm frame. And so I probably will go ahead and order one and see how that does. So yeah, not super interesting here because there wasn't a lot of problems here. But I figured it'd be worthwhile taking you through this and show you how I'm going through and analyzing things. All right, till next time, cheers.